She was about to miss the flight of her career, but an elderly woman in distress needed help. Grace, a dedicated social worker, chose kindness over ambition, never imagining that this single act at JFK Airport would unravel a web connecting her to a reclusive billionaire, his powerful family, and a mysterious antique brooch with a story of its own. What if a moment of compassion for a stranger was actually fate knocking, leading to a love and a destiny she never dreamed possible? This story will make you question coincidences and believe in the power of a helping hand. Have you ever chosen to help someone even when it cost you something significant? Share your experience in the comments. And don't touch that dial or, well, screen. Make sure you're subscribed and have the bell on, because this journey is one you won't forget. Are you all right, ma'am? I saw you alone here for several minutes, Grace Monroe said, kneeling beside the elderly woman's wheelchair. The older woman looked up, her eyes clouded with unshed tears. My caregiver went to get help half an hour ago and hasn't returned. My flight leaves in 20 minutes, and I can't move on my own. Grace took the wrinkled hands between hers, ignoring the final boarding calls for her own flight echoing through the speakers of New York's JFK International Airport. My name is Grace Monroe. Don't worry, I won't leave you alone. A few feet away, a man in a dark suit observed the scene while talking on his phone, his travel bag beside him. Ethan Ainsworth had planned to surprise his mother at the airport, but an urgent business call had delayed him. Now, he watched as a stranger did what he should have been doing. Grace was a social worker from Miami, Florida. At 28, she had already seen enough suffering to recognize it in the eyes of others. She was traveling to an international conference on community development, an opportunity she had awaited for years. What's your name? She asked gently. Eleanor Ainsworth, the old woman replied, squeezing Grace's hands. My son Ethan should be here, but he's always busy with his business. Grace looked around for an airport employee. Her own flight was about to depart. I'm going to help you find your caregiver and make sure you board your flight. Okay? Ethan finished his call and approached discreetly, without intervening. Something in the young woman's sincerity stopped him. He watched her speak with airport staff, check his mother's documents, and finally locate the missing caregiver. When the situation was finally resolved, Grace looked at her watch and sighed. She had missed her flight. Thank you, my child, Eleanor said, still holding Grace's hands. You're an angel. It's nothing, Mrs. Ainsworth. I'm glad I could help. Ethan watched the young woman walk away towards the airline counter. He noticed her passenger ID hanging from her bag and discreetly took a photo with his phone. Then he finally approached his mother. Mom, sorry for the delay. Ethan, an angel appeared to help me while you were on the phone, Eleanor replied reproachfully. Hours later, on her rescheduled flight, Grace opened her bag to look for a book. Among her things, she found something she hadn't put there. An antique silver brooch with precious stones. Next to it, a note written in trembling handwriting. For the angel who showed kindness to a stranger. May this bring you the same luck it brought me in life. With affection, Eleanor A. Grace held the brooch under the light. It seemed very valuable. Too much to accept from a stranger. But the plane had already taken off, and she had no way to return it. The conference in New York turned out to be a success. Grace presented her innovative ideas on community development, earning the respect of international representatives. Throughout her stay, the brooch remained tucked away in her suitcase, a constant reminder of a fleeting encounter that somehow felt important. 3 months later, back in Miami, Grace's life returned to its routine. She grew up in a broken home, with an absent father and a mother who worked multiple shifts. This reality spurred her to become a social worker, dedicated to creating the support spaces she herself had needed as a child. Her community center in one of Miami's most vulnerable neighborhoods was her pride, though they constantly struggled for funding. That morning, her boss called an urgent meeting. Grace arrived running, her wavy brown hair hastily tied back. I have news, announced Mr. Richards, the center's director. A Boston-based company wants to expand its social responsibility programs to Florida. Ainsworth Developments. It seems the founder's son will come personally to see our work. Grace listened cautiously. Large companies often sought only publicity, not real commitment. When is he coming? She asked. Next week, Mr. Richards replied. And Grace, I want you in charge of presenting our projects. After your presentation in New York, you're our best asset. That night, as Grace reviewed the center's projects, her hand involuntarily touched the brooch hidden in a drawer of her modest apartment. For some unknown reason, she felt that something important was about to happen. The imposing building of the Hope Community Center contrasted with the humble neighborhood surrounding it. Grace walked the halls, adjusting details for the visit of the Boston businessman. Chloe, did you put up the photos of the urban garden project? Grace asked her best friend and colleague. All set, but I still don't understand why you're so nervous. It's just another businessman trying to clean up his image, Chloe replied, arranging chairs. We need the funding. The children in the after-school program depend on us. The main door opened. Mr. Richards entered, accompanied by a tall man in an impeccable suit. Grace froze instantly. It was the same man she had briefly seen at the airport months ago. I present to you Ethan Ainsworth, CEO of Ainsworth Developments, Mr. Richards announced. Ethan extended his hand towards Grace, his face perfectly composed, showing no sign of recognition. Miss Monroe, I've heard a lot about your work. Grace shook his hand, bewildered. Doesn't he remember me from the airport? Welcome to our center, Mr. Ainsworth. I hope our projects will be of interest to you. During the presentation, Grace explained each initiative with passion. Ethan listened attentively, asking precise questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of community development. Your focus on strengthening local capacities instead of creating dependencies seems extraordinary to me, Ethan commented at the end of the tour. It's the only way to create sustainable change, Grace replied, still cautious. At the end of the day, Ethan requested a private meeting with Grace. In the small office she shared with 3 other workers, the tension was palpable. Miss Monroe, I'll be direct. I want Ainsworth Developments to fund your projects for the next 3 years, with the possibility of extension. Grace looked at him intently. Why? There are larger organizations with greater media visibility. Ethan smiled slightly. Precisely for that reason. We're not looking for easy publicity, but real impact. Meanwhile, in Boston, Eleanor Ainsworth was having tea in her elegant living room. Her caregiver, Maria, accompanied her. Have you heard anything from your son, Mrs. Ainsworth? Ethan has been in Florida for a week. He says it's for business, but he sounds different on our calls. Something has changed in him. Eleanor caressed an empty space in her jewelry box, where the brooch she gave to that young woman at the airport used to be. I always tell him about my airport angel, that girl who helped me when he was busy with his calls. I wish I could thank her properly. Back in Miami, Ethan extended his initial 3-day stay to 2 weeks. Every morning he visited the community center with new ideas or questions. I need to fully understand how your programs work before designing the funding plan, he explained to Mr. Richards, though his eyes always sought Grace. One afternoon, while reviewing the budget for the job training program, Grace confronted Ethan. Mr. Ainsworth, why don't you mention that we saw each other at JFK Airport 3 months ago? Ethan put the documents on the table, surprised by the direct question. I was waiting for the right moment. I didn't want you to think our collaboration had personal motives. And does it? Grace asked. I admire what I saw that day. Someone who sacrificed their own interests to help a stranger. Those kinds of values are exactly what I look for in our community partners. That night, Grace shared the situation with Chloe in her small apartment. I don't know if I can trust him, Chloe. It's too much of a coincidence. Grace, you've spent years fighting for funding for your ideas. If this handsome millionaire wants to support them, what does it matter how he found you? I don't like feeling like there's something he's not telling me. The days turned into weeks. Ethan canceled his return to Boston for the 3rd time. He began inviting Grace to working lunches that inevitably extended, conversing about much more than community projects. My father built the Ainsworth empire from scratch, Ethan told her during one dinner. But he was never present at home. My mother was both father and mother to me. My father abandoned us when I was 6, Grace confessed, surprised by her own openness. My mother worked day and night. Community organizations were my second family. As time passed, Ethan began to accompany Grace on her visits to the communities. He would take off his jacket, roll up his sleeves, and participate in activities with children and the elderly. I've never seen this side of life, he admitted one day while helping build an urban garden. In my world, problems are solved with money. Money helps, but real solutions require time, presence, and commitment, Grace replied. During a video call with his mother, Ethan casually mentioned Grace's name. Eleanor sat up straighter in her chair. Grace? What is she like? Passionate, intelligent, committed to her community. Different from anyone I've ever known. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. She sounds like someone special. I'd like to meet her someday. Ethan was silent for a moment. Maybe you already have, Mom. This is getting so interesting. Ethan is clearly drawn to Grace, and his mother already has a special connection to her. But Grace is still wary. Do you think Ethan should have told her about the airport encounter sooner? And will his mother's story about the brooch reveal an even deeper connection? Share your thoughts below. If you're hooked, give this video a like. As 6 months of collaboration passed, the joint projects between the Hope Community Center and Ainsworth Developments showed impressive results. The model was being replicated in 3 other Miami neighborhoods. Mr. Richards called Grace to his office. Whatever you're doing with Mr. Ainsworth, keep doing it. We've never had such a committed sponsor. Grace felt her cheeks burn. We're just colleagues, Mr. Richards. But that night, while reviewing preparations for the community festival celebrating the semester's achievements, Grace admitted to herself that her feelings for Ethan had crossed the professional line. And what scared her most was the growing suspicion that he felt the same way. The sun was setting over the neighborhood square as Grace supervised the final preparations for the community festival. Colorful banners announced, Spring Celebration, Project Hope. The food tent needs more tables, Chloe reported, approaching with a checklist. I'll talk to Don Ramon to borrow some from his restaurant, Grace replied distractedly. That won't be necessary, a familiar voice interrupted. Ethan appeared carrying 2 folding tables. I just bought 10 more for the center. They're on their way. Chloe looked at Grace with a knowing smile and discreetly walked away. Over the past few months, Ethan's presence had become constant at the center and in Grace's life. You didn't have to do that, Grace said as they set up the tables together. I wanted to. This festival is as important to you as it is to me. Their hands brushed briefly as they placed a tablecloth. Grace felt that now familiar tingle she tried to ignore for professionalism's sake. The festival was the culmination of 6 months of joint work. Community gardens were producing food for local families. The job training program had employed 20 people, and the new children's space offered after-school support to over 50 students. That evening, as music filled the square and entire families enjoyed the celebration, Ethan and Grace found themselves watching everything from a quiet corner. You know, when my father died 5 years ago, he left me a business empire but no guide on how to use it for something meaningful, Ethan confessed. And yet, here you are, eating corn on the cob in a neighborhood most of your colleagues would never visit. Ethan laughed softly. Thanks to you. You showed me a world that existed in front of my eyes, but that I had never truly seen. The sky lit up with the first fireworks. The entire community looked up, faces illuminated by bursts of color. Ethan looked at Grace, her profile bathed in changing lights. Without thinking, she turned her face towards him. Their eyes met, and in a mutual impulse, their lips did too. The kiss was brief, almost timid, but laden with feelings accumulated over months. When they separated, Grace took a step back, surprised by what had just happened. Ethan, this is complicated. We work together. I know, and I'll respect whatever you decide. The following days passed in a bubble of confused emotions. Professionally, their relationship remained impeccable. Personally, They shared prolonged glances and conversations that extended late into the night. 2 weeks after the festival, Ethan invited Grace to dinner at a small restaurant far from downtown, where no one would know them. "I want you to meet my mother," he said suddenly as they shared dessert. "There's a charity gala in Boston next month. I'd like you to accompany me." Grace put her spoon down. "Ethan, have you thought about how complicated this would be? We're from completely different worlds." "Precisely why it works. You teach me to see reality beyond my privileged bubble, and I can offer you resources to make your most ambitious projects a reality. I don't want people to think I'm with you for money or influence." Ethan took her hand gently. "No one who knows you would ever think that." Finally, Grace accepted. Their relationship continued to develop discreetly. For the center staff, it was evident that something had changed, but they respected their privacy. In Boston, Eleanor noticed changes in her son's calls. "You sound different, Ethan. Happier." "I am, Mom. I'm learning a lot in Florida." "Only about community projects?" Eleanor asked shrewdly. Ethan smiled into the phone. "You'll meet her soon. She's coming with me to the Foundation's gala." "Is it the social worker you talk so much about?" "Yes. I think you'll love her." Eleanor smiled to herself. Her maternal instinct told her this wasn't a fleeting relationship like others her son had had. As the travel date approached, Grace's anxiety increased. One night, as Ethan walked her to her apartment, she stopped at the door. "I'm scared, Ethan. I know nothing about charity galas or how to behave in your world." Ethan looked at her tenderly. "You don't need to pretend to be someone else. My mother just wants to meet the woman who has made her son so happy. And if she doesn't like me? Impossible. She has a sixth sense for recognizing genuine people." Grace hadn't told Ethan about the brooch. She kept it as a secret, a personal treasure that somehow connected her to the old woman she had helped. The day before the trip, Chloe helped Grace pack. "This dress is perfect for the gala," Chloe said, showing her an elegant black dress they had found at a thrift store. "Simple but sophisticated." "I feel like an imposter, Chloe. His family has centuries of wealth, and I come from a neighborhood like this." "Precisely why you're exactly what he needs. Someone real in a world of appearances." The morning of the trip, Ethan picked her up in a chauffeured car. During the first-class flight, Grace barely touched her food. "My mother lives in the family home in Beacon Hill," Ethan explained as the plane began its descent. "It's large but cozy. She insisted we stay there instead of a hotel." "Have you told her about us?" "I've told her you're very special to me. The rest she wants to discover for herself." The car that picked them up at Boston Logan Airport drove through the elegant streets of one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. Finally, it stopped in front of a modern colonial-style mansion. "We're here," Ethan announced, gently squeezing Grace's hand. "Don't worry, she'll love you." What neither of them could imagine was that this encounter would reveal a connection that would forever change the course of their relationship. The Ainsworth mansion was imposing yet warm, with an exuberant garden and a carved stone entrance. Grace took a deep breath as Ethan opened the door. "Ethan, son, you've finally arrived." A familiar voice resonated from within. Grace froze in the doorway. In the elegant living room, seated in a wheelchair, was the same elderly woman she had helped at the airport months ago. "Mom, I want to introduce you to Grace Monroe, the project director from the community center in Miami," Ethan said, not noticing the shock on both women's faces. Eleanor stared intently at Grace, her eyes widening with astonishment and recognition. "My goodness, it's you. My airport angel," Eleanor exclaimed, extending her arms. Ethan looked confusedly at his mother and then at Grace. "Do you know each other?" Grace advanced slowly, kneeling beside Eleanor's wheelchair, just as she had done that day at the airport. "Mrs. Ainsworth, what a surprise to find you like this." Eleanor took Grace's hands in hers, tears in her eyes. "Ethan, remember the young woman who helped me when I was left alone at the airport? It's her. I've told you so much about my guardian angel." Ethan paled, looking alternately at his mother and Grace. "Mom, Yes, I remember. Grace stood up slowly, connecting all the pieces. That's why you sought me out for the project. Due to what happened at the airport, dinner was tense. Eleanor, oblivious to the discomfort, excitedly recounted how Grace had helped her when she was lost and scared. Without her, I would have missed my flight, and she missed hers helping me. Grace barely touched her food, processing the revelation. Ethan tried to maintain the conversation, but his eyes constantly sought Grace's, pleading for a chance to explain. When Eleanor retired to rest, Ethan and Grace were left alone in the garden. You were right, Grace said finally. Your mother recognizes genuine people. What I don't understand is why you weren't genuine with me. I'm sorry, Grace. I should have told you from the beginning. Why didn't you? Ethan sighed deeply. When I saw you helping my mother, I felt ashamed. I should have been there for her, not a stranger. I took the photo of your ID, thinking of thanking you somehow. And then, I researched who you were. When I discovered your work, I was genuinely impressed. The project in Florida was already planned, but I asked to supervise it personally to meet you. Grace stood up, crossing her arms. So all this time, while I believed you valued our work, you were just paying a debt of gratitude? No, Grace. That might have been at the beginning, but what happened afterward, what we built together, what I feel for you, all of that is real. The day of the gala, Grace maintained appearances out of courtesy to Eleanor, who didn't understand the sudden coldness between her and Ethan. During the event, while Ethan attended to other guests, Eleanor approached Grace. The brooch I gave you, do you still have it? Grace nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. I always keep it with me, though I never wear it. It's too valuable. That brooch has a story I'll tell you someday. It's no coincidence it ended up in your hands. The next morning, Grace announced she would return to Miami immediately. But the museum gala is tomorrow, Eleanor protested. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ainsworth. An emergency came up at the center, Grace lied, unable to face the situation any longer. At the airport, Ethan made one last attempt. Please, Grace, give me a chance to explain everything. You already explained, Ethan. You started all this because of a debt, not because you believed in our work. That's not fair. I've shown my commitment to every project. But you weren't honest with me. You built our relationship on a lie. It wasn't a lie, it was an omission. I was afraid you'd think exactly what you're thinking now. Grace took her boarding pass. I need time to think. Back in Miami, Grace immersed herself in work, avoiding talk of Ethan. The funding continued, but now all communications went through Mr. Richards. Chloe tried to cheer her up. At least tell me what happened in Boston. You came back like a ghost. Grace finally relented and explained the situation. Do you understand now? All this time I thought he really valued our work, that he saw me as a colleague, maybe something more. But it all started because I helped his mother. And does that invalidate what you built afterward? Chloe questioned. People meet in strange ways, Grace. What matters is what happens next. Months passed. Ethan's physical absence was noticeable, but his influence persisted in every funded project, in every new initiative approved without question. Mr. Richards entered Grace's office one day with news. Ainsworth Developments has doubled the budget for the job training program. They say the results exceeded their expectations. Grace nodded, maintaining her professional expression. It's good to know they remain committed to the project. They also sent this for you personally, Mr. Richards added, handing her an envelope. Inside was a formal invitation to participate as the keynote speaker at the International Social Innovation Conference in New York, the same one she had attended a year prior. And next to the invitation, a handwritten note. Some encounters change our lives forever, even if we don't know it at the time. Whatever your decision, I am proud of the work we have achieved together. Ethan. That night, Grace took the brooch from its hiding place and observed it under the light. For the first time, she wondered if she should listen to the story Eleanor wanted to tell her. A week after receiving the invitation, Grace found an additional envelope in her mail. The stamp was from Boston, and the sender, Eleanor Ainsworth. With trembling hands, She opened it to find a handwritten letter. Dear Grace, since your abrupt departure from our home, I have wanted to communicate with you. Ethan didn't tell me all the details, but I understand there was a misunderstanding about how you met. Allow me to tell you a story. I was not born into wealth as many believe. I come from a small town in Maine where my family barely had enough to eat. At 18, I came to Boston seeking work like many young women. One day, while cleaning at a bus terminal, I saw an old woman faint. Everyone passed by without stopping. I left my work to help her, losing my job that same day. That woman was Consuelo Ainsworth, the mother of the man who would later become my husband. Before we parted, she gave me the same brooch you now possess, telling me it belonged to women with pure hearts who crossed the Ainsworth's path. My son is like his father, brilliant in business but clumsy with words when his feelings are deep. If he kept seeking you out after the airport, it wasn't out of obligation, but because he saw in you what I also saw, a genuine soul in a world of appearances. The decision to return is yours, but you should know that brooch has always found its rightful owner. With affection, Eleanor. Grace let the letter fall onto the table, overwhelmed. She picked up the brooch again, seeing it now with different eyes. Meanwhile, in Boston, Ethan was in an unusual situation. For the first time in his adult life, he was attending a training course, surrounded not by executives but by social workers and community volunteers. The welfare approach perpetuates dependency. We must create programs that develop autonomy, the instructor explained. Ethan took detailed notes, remembering Grace's words months earlier. Beside him, several Ainsworth Development's employees seemed equally focused. Upon leaving, his assistant awaited him. Mr. Ainsworth, you have 3 pending calls from investors, and the board requests your presence for tomorrow's vote. Cancel the calls. The vote can wait. I have to finish the report on the community development model we will implement. The assistant looked at him, surprised, but nodded. That night, Ethan dined with his mother on the family terrace. Did you send her the letter? He asked bluntly. Eleanor smiled slightly. A week ago. Some truths need time to be processed. You shouldn't have intervened, Mom. When you reach my age, you'll understand that life is too short to let pride or misunderstandings separate people who belong together. Ethan looked towards the garden. I've respected her by giving her space, but every day. I know, son. It's like when your father and I separated those months before we married. Sometimes distance clarifies what really matters. In Miami, Grace finalized preparations for the conference. She had decided to attend, not only for the professional opportunity but to close a personal cycle. The night before her trip, Chloe helped her prepare her presentation. Have you decided if you'll talk to him? She asked while reviewing the slides. First, I want to hear what Eleanor promised to tell me about the brooch. After that, I don't know. Grace, in the 6 months since you returned from Boston, have you met anyone who makes you feel the way he did? Grace remained silent. Both knew the answer. The flight to New York was a whirlwind of emotions. Upon landing, Grace half expected to see Ethan waiting for her, but the airport was full of strangers. She checked into the conference hotel and found an envelope at reception. Inside, a brief note. When you're ready to hear the full story, I'll be waiting. Eleanor. Next to the note, an address that wasn't the Ainsworth mansion. That afternoon, gathering her courage, Grace took a taxi to the indicated address. It was a simple cafe in a traditional neighborhood, far from the exclusive areas. Upon entering, she saw Eleanor at a corner table, not in her wheelchair. I usually only need it for long distances, Eleanor explained, noticing her surprise. I'm so glad you came. Grace sat across from her. Your letter made me think a lot. This place, Eleanor gestured around, was where I worked as a waitress after losing my job at the terminal. And this is where Alistair Ainsworth first came, looking for the woman who had helped his mother. Like Ethan looked for me, Grace murmured. Ainsworth men are predictable, Eleanor smiled. Alistair came every day, sitting at that table ordering only coffee. I ignored him, convinced a rich man only sought to take advantage of a poor girl. What made you change your mind? I found him one Sunday helping at a soup kitchen. No jacket or tie, serving soup to the homeless. Not to impress me. He didn't even know I'd be there. He was learning about a world he didn't know. Grace felt a lump in her throat, remembering Ethan rolling up his sleeves to work in the community gardens. The brooch, Eleanor continued, has passed from woman to woman in the family, not by blood, but by heart. Consuelo gave it to me, I gave it to you. But I'm not part of your family. Eleanor took her hands, her eyes bright. The brooch always knows who it belongs to, before we ourselves know it. That night, in her hotel room, Grace held the brooch under the light. For the first time, she pinned it to her blouse, feeling a strange sense of belonging. The next day, she presented her conference on innovation in community development. Her voice was firm, her ideas clear. Upon finishing, she received a standing ovation. As she gathered her notes, she noticed a familiar figure at the back of the room. Ethan was there, not in a suit but wearing jeans and a simple shirt. Their eyes met across the distance. Your presentation was brilliant, he said, approaching as the room emptied. Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here. I've been attending all the sessions. I'm learning a lot. Grace noticed he wore a regular participant badge, not a presenter's. You look different. I've been reevaluating my priorities. The Ainsworth Foundation is implementing new programs based on the models we developed together in Miami. I'm glad to hear that. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Grace, I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just wanted you to know that what started as an attempt to show gratitude became the most significant thing in my life. She unconsciously touched the brooch on her blouse. Ethan noticed it, his eyes widening with surprise. You're wearing it. Your mother told me its story. It's beautiful. And true. My grandmother gave it to her without knowing she would end up being part of our family. Grace took a deep breath. Ethan, I need to know. If I had never crossed paths with your mother at the airport, if we had met another way, would it have been different? I would have found you somehow, Grace. I'm sure of it. The return to Miami was different this time. Grace carried with her not only new knowledge from the conference but also a clarity she had been seeking for months. So, did you talk to him? Chloe asked as soon as Grace walked through the apartment door. Yes, Grace replied, putting down her suitcase. It was revealing. And? Don't leave me hanging. Did you reconcile? Is he coming back to Florida? Grace sat down, unconsciously caressing the brooch she now wore daily. I told him I needed time, that I understood his initial motives, but that I couldn't just pick things up where we left them. The following weeks, Grace immersed herself in her work with renewed energy. The community center expanded its programs thanks to continued funding from Ainsworth Developments, though all communications came through formal representatives. One afternoon, Mr. Richards called her to his office. I just received interesting news, he said, showing her an email. Ethan Ainsworth has resigned as CEO of Ainsworth Developments. What? Grace took the tablet to read the statement. Why would he do that? Apparently, to direct the Ainsworth Foundation full-time. They've tripled their budget for social programs in Latin America and the U.S. That night, Grace received an envelope. Inside, she found a newspaper clipping from Boston showing Ethan in a marginalized neighborhood, without a suit, working with children on a community art project. The photo was accompanied by a small note. Not to impress you, to understand what you understand naturally. 3,000 miles away in Boston, Ethan finished a workday at Hope Boston, a community center modeled after Grace's. Mr. Ainsworth, the materials for tomorrow's workshop are ready, reported Lucy, a young volunteer. Thank you, Lucy. And please just Ethan. There are no hierarchies here. Back at the family mansion, Eleanor awaited him for dinner. You look tired but happy, she observed as they shared the meal. I am. It's a different kind of tired than I felt before. More satisfying. Have you heard anything from her? Ethan shook his head. I'm respecting her space. When she's ready, if she ever is, she'll find me. The brooch always finds its way back, Eleanor smiled enigmatically. Months passed. Ethan traveled constantly between different U.S. cities and Latin American countries, implementing programs based on the models he had learned from Grace. He took courses, attended conferences, and worked directly in communities without cameras or publicity. In Miami, Grace continued to receive occasional press clippings or small notes showcasing Ethan's work. She never replied but kept each one in a special box. One morning, Chloe rushed into her office. "Grace, you won't believe this," she exclaimed, showing her phone. "You've been nominated for the International Social Innovation Award." "What? That's impossible. Those awards are for large organizations with million-dollar budgets." "Well, read it yourself. Your autonomous community development model is among the 5 finalists. The ceremony is in New York next month." Grace read the notification incredulously. Her name appeared alongside renowned global leaders in social development. "Who nominated me?" Chloe smiled. "It doesn't say, but I have a good idea who it might have been." That afternoon, Grace received a formal letter from the Ainsworth Foundation, signed by its president Eleanor Ainsworth, offering to cover all expenses for her attendance at the ceremony in New York. To her surprise, she found no personal note from Ethan attached. The night before her trip, while packing, Grace received a message from an unknown number. "The model you created is transforming lives across the Americas. Regardless of who wins tomorrow, you've already triumphed. If you're still not ready to talk, I'll understand. I'll be in the back row just to applaud you. Ethan." In New York, the International Social Innovation Award Auditorium was filled with global leaders, NGO representatives, and philanthropists. Grace, seated among the nominees, discreetly searched the back row but couldn't distinguish Ethan. When her name was announced as the winner, the auditorium erupted in applause. With trembling hands, Grace went up to the stage. "This award isn't just mine," she said into the microphone. "It belongs to every person in the communities who believed another world is possible." Sometimes, change begins with a simple act of kindness between strangers. From the stage, she finally saw him. He wasn't in the back row, as he had said, but in a discreet side seat. Their eyes met briefly before she continued her speech. At the reception afterward, Grace was approached by numerous organizations interested in implementing her model. When she finally managed a moment alone, she sensed a familiar presence. "Congratulations. You deserve it more than anyone," Ethan said, maintaining a respectful distance. "This was all you're doing?" Grace questioned. "The nomination came from an independent committee of experts. I only shared the documentation of our projects with them. Your work spoke for itself." Grace noticed the changes in him. His posture was less rigid, his clothes simpler, his eyes warmer, but also wiser. "They've offered to expand the model to 10 more countries," she commented. "I know. The Ainsworth Foundation is ready to support, without conditions or seeking the spotlight." A silence ensued, not uncomfortable like before, but expectant. "I've been receiving your notes," Grace finally said, "and following your work. I didn't expect a response. I just wanted you to know your teachings weren't in vain." Grace touched the brooch on her dress. "Your mother keeps writing to me. She's told me the whole family history. She's persistent when she believes in something." Ethan smiled. "She told me you resigned from the company presidency. I needed to find my own path, not just follow the family legacy. I think I finally understand what you were trying to teach me from the beginning." Before Grace could respond, they were interrupted by a group of reporters wanting to interview the winner. Ethan discreetly stepped aside, giving her space. Later that night, Grace found a note in her purse. "If you're ready for a cup of coffee, I'll be at the hotel cafe at 9 a.m. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 colleagues sharing experiences." The next morning, the cafe was nearly empty when Grace entered exactly at 9. Ethan was seated at a back table, with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said when she sat down. "Neither was I," Grace replied with a small smile. "You know, in all this time I learned something important. What started as a chance encounter at an airport led us both exactly where we needed to be, even if it wasn't together. Grace took a sip of coffee, considering her words. Maybe some people are destined to cross paths to change the direction of their lives, even if they later take separate roads. Ethan nodded, a mixture of acceptance and melancholy in his gaze. I just want you to know that the year we shared in Miami completely transformed my worldview and my purpose. For that, I will always be grateful to you. Grace extended her hand across the table, lightly touching his. Perhaps our paths don't have to remain separate forever. 1 year later, Miami International Airport buzzed with activity. Among the crowd, a young mother desperately tried to manage her 2 small children while fumbling for her documents. Carlos, Marina, stay close, please, she pleaded as the younger one ran towards the seats and the girl tugged at her skirt. A woman with wavy brown hair approached, kneeling beside the boy. Hi, little friend. Are you playing hide and seek with your mommy? Grace asked with a warm smile. I think she's worried because she can't see you. The little boy nodded, allowing Grace to take his hand and return him to his mother. Thank you, ma'am. I'm alone with them, and it's so difficult. The young mother sighed, relieved. Allow me to help you, a tall man intervened, joining them and picking up the suitcases the woman had left unattended. My wife and I know how complicated traveling with children can be. Ethan placed the suitcases on a cart while Grace helped the woman organize her documents. A few feet away, Eleanor watched the scene from her wheelchair with a nostalgic smile. My husband is waiting for us in Bogota. It's the first time I'm traveling alone with the children, the woman explained, now calmer. We'll accompany you to the boarding gate, Grace offered. Right, Ethan? When the family finally boarded their flight, the 3 returned to the airport's VIP lounge. Some things never change, do they? Eleanor commented, taking Grace's hand, where not only the family brooch shone but also a simple wedding ring. You're still the same airport angel. Now I understand why that brooch ended up with me, Grace smiled. It wasn't a coincidence. Reconciliation had come gradually. After New York, they started as colleagues, collaborating on projects remotely. Ethan traveled frequently to Miami, and Grace occasionally to Boston. Their professional encounters transformed into dinners, long conversations, and a renewed mutual understanding. 6 months later, during the inauguration of a community center in a small community on the U.S.-Mexico border, Ethan had proposed marriage without a ring or grand gestures, only with sincere words as they both rested after a day's work. The wedding was simple, celebrated in the community garden of the first project they had developed together in Miami. Attendees ranged from business people and politicians to the families benefiting from their programs. Now they jointly ran the Hope Ainsworth Foundation, with offices in 5 U.S. states and 3 Latin American countries. Ethan divided his time between overseeing some family businesses and community work, while Grace led the expansion of their social development models. Eleanor had sold the family mansion to move into a smaller, cozier house, from where she served as honorary president of the foundation. Our flight to Lima is boarding, Ethan announced, checking his watch. The new centers in Peru. I still can't believe they built 20 community centers in a year, Eleanor commented with pride. And it's only the beginning, Grace replied. The model is being replicated even without our direct intervention. As they walked towards the boarding gate, Grace paused for a moment, observing the airport's hustle and bustle. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked, taking her hand. About how a simple moment of kindness can trigger something so big, she replied, gently squeezing his fingers. If I hadn't stopped to help a lonely old woman, the brooch always finds its way, Eleanor intervened with an enigmatic smile. Just like people destined to meet. A voice announced the final call for their flight. Ethan pushed Eleanor's wheelchair while Grace walked beside him. A family united not by obligation but by choice, by a shared purpose and a love built on common values. Who are you? The young mother had asked before boarding her plane, intrigued by the kindness of these strangers. Grace had smiled, gently touching the brooch on her blouse. Just someone who learned that sometimes, A small gesture of kindness at an airport can change an entire life. As they boarded their own flight, Ethan gently kissed Grace's hand. "Do you know what the best part of our story is?" "What?" she asked, looking at him curiously. "That it's just beginning." This story, born from a simple act of kindness at an airport, reminds us that our lives are interconnected in ways we can barely imagine. Grace and Ethan's journey teaches that true purpose is often found when we step outside ourselves to help others, and that love, built on honesty and shared values, can bridge any distance and heal any past. It shows that a legacy isn't just about what we build, but about the hearts we touch and the kindness we ripple out into the world. What do you think? Are moments of kindness truly random, or are they threads in a larger design? Can one person truly make a world of difference? We'd love to read your inspiring thoughts in the comments below. If this story of serendipity, compassion, and enduring love has uplifted you, please show your support with a like, subscribe for more tales that celebrate the best of humanity, and share it with someone who believes that every encounter holds a purpose. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest of hellos, and the most profound connections are forged in the most unexpected of places.